So I picked up this drill press the other day, mostly complete, missing the motor and a belt guard. It's a really heavy duty old press, a lot nicer than the one I use now. So we're going to clean it up and see if we can get it working. I think I found a motor for it, so see what we can do. So this chuck had some roughness. It was rusty and dirty. So it just held on to that shaft with, I think they call it a Jacob's taper. It's just kind of an interference taper fit. So there's lots of videos on how to take these chucks apart. I had to turn an adapter out of a pipe fitting, and then it's just a matter of pressing that collar off on this particular chuck anyway. Came off pretty easy. A few taps and then that sleeve comes off, and then underneath that sleeve there's a split. It's a split nut that comes off, and then you should be able to pull the jaws out, and then it's just a matter of cleaning everything really good. I will say that when I clean this stuff, I polish all the outside parts. When I'm working on any machine surface, I'm really careful. I don't just go sanding on those. They're pretty critical. I mean, I try and be gentle with, a brass brush, and I don't want to change the dimensions on any of the critical parts that are going to affect the trueness of the chuck. I degrease everything real good with mineral spirits and try and get it as clean as I possibly can. Any little tiny bit of grit or dirt in that chuck is going to make it rough and cause it to hang up. And so now we're ready for reassembly. That just shows that split nut. You can buy rebuild kits for these chucks too that'll give you 3 new jaws and a new split nut, but this one really wasn't that worn, just really rusty. So it doesn't take much to push it back in there. I use this press, but a little arbor press will do the trick. I think you could probably use a big vise and push it back together. So you press it back in there, and then afterwards, man, this thing was so smooth. A little bit of light oil, and it was just like a new chuck. If you do decide you're going to disassemble a chuck, if it's a Jacobs, I would go to their website. They've got a great technical resource that has lots of information on repair parts and instructions and things like that. Not every Jacobs chuck comes apart the same way. This one's just kind of a general purpose. It's not an expensive chuck by any means, but I have boogered them up before. They don't all press off the same way, so do a little research. But all in all, it's not hard to take them apart and clean them up. I have no idea what this thing was painted with. It was this really heavy aluminum silver kind of paint. It didn't require a stripper, just regular mineral spirits. It came right off, but it was really thick. It was just really, really strange stuff. So I just got the majority of it off, and that'll be good enough for my purposes. With this project, I intend to actually use this drill press. It's not just for display, so I clean it up pretty good. I just brush it with primer and paint, just an oil-based enamel. It doesn't have to be beautiful, it just has to be decent. I'm sure it'll get some scratches and chips as I use it over time, so it cleans up pretty nice. On my lathe, there's a disconnect between if you use the back gears and use the higher speeds, you can disconnect that. So I disconnect that before I spin it. So there's actually, it's not mechanically coupled. So if you put any pressure on it, you can just stop it. I know this looks kind of dangerous, you know, someone in there sanding. This video is sped way up, so actually that thing is turning really slow, and like I say, any pressure at all and it just stops spinning. So don't be too alarmed that I'm going to get caught up in this lathe or something. I love using Johnson's paste wax on this stuff. It makes it so nice and clean and smooth and keeps it from rusting. This press used some tapered roller bearings, which are really nice because you can adjust the amount of clearance when you tighten down that top nut, so you can really take a lot of the play and run out of them. I used a heavier grease, and as time goes on, I'll probably experiment with if it should be a lighter oil or a heavier grease like that. But I pack them the same way I pack an automotive style bearing, and it seems like they work really good. In a moment here, you'll see me, when I put those bearings on that shaft, I ended up redoing it where I took a little bit of a red Loctite, and I actually locked that lower bearing right there on. I didn't ever want to worry about the race spinning if the bearing hung up or anything like that. So really tightened it up good, and it has a neat means for adjusting that bearing. You can see that pin goes in and locks that top collar on, and then that bottom part spins, and you can take all the excessive play out of that bearing. Obviously you don't want to get it too tight, so I kind of experimented with it and got it till it felt nice and smooth, but wasn't going to be too tight if it ever warmed up and expanded. I picked this motor up used. It's a 3/4 horse, which is plenty big, 1750 RPM. It's a pretty nice motor. Most expensive part of the whole project, really. And so I cleaned it up just a little bit and painted it to match. These are the 3 bolts that were on the feed handle, and I just basically took them, I cleaned them up real good, I thread the ends. I bought 3 little thermoplastic threaded ball handles for it, and it made a pretty nice handle. It's a hell of a lot nicer than grabbing onto just some old bolt heads. I bought this switch off eBay, I think. It's a really nice switch. This motor on this drill press can pull like up to 11 or 12 amps, so I wanted a good quality switch. This is like a double line break switch, so the neutral and the hot both go through it. It has a really positive feel to it. I mounted it here on this motor mount. Generally, I don't like to drill holes and tap things and modify them, but this drill press, it already had on this motor plate several holes that someone else had added, because this motor, they had drilled some different holes. Anyway, so this is how I did it, and it was a really strong, stable mount. I like it. The switch moves with the motor, so when you go to tension it, there's no wire slop or anything. So it turned out really good. It's a heck of a nice switch. you go to put on this spring, you can make this thing as tight as you want to. That thing's got a pretty heavy quill in it, so I didn't make it so tight that the thing just pops back up on its own. It will retract on its own, but mostly I just wanted to hold it up and out of the way. I didn't want to go just crazy tight on it, so I put it where I thought it was right. It probably could have been a little tighter. This cap on top just taps in to plug the hole on top. I've seen it where you can get a gear reduction that fits in here, and I'm going to keep my eyes peeled for one of those. These are the little screws that hold down for the belt adjustment, and some thumb screws would have been nice. I didn't have any. It was late. The hardware store wasn't open, so I went ahead and I just took a few little machine screws. I turned the heads down in the lathe a little bit, and I used some of that red Loctite, which that stuff sets up like none other. So anyway, it worked just fine. They're not really elegant, but screws in there good and holds. If I have problems with it coming loose, then I'll go buy some thumb screws, I guess. I think I'm going to call this project pretty much done. I'm happy with how it came out. Functionally, it's good. There was a couple things that was not perfect. This step pulley, the size of the difference in each step is not the same on the step pulley I bought. I couldn't find one that was just the same, so because of that, when you switch speeds, it always requires a lot of adjustment. You can't kind of just like fudge it from one step to the next. But I'll keep my eyes out and I might find a better step pulley. Chances are I will use the slowest speed on it anyway, but that's not the end of the world. Pretty solid old press. I always take these little keychain rewinders and I like to use them on my drill presses. It's really handy for the chuck key, so you don't have to worry about hanging on to that or losing it. This drill press is supposed to have a guard up here, and since I never could figure out what brand this was, I don't know. I thought about making something. I think I'm going to keep my eyes out, and I bet if I find one off another press, I can probably adapt it to fit that. So, anyway, that's how it turned out. It seems to run pretty good. I never did figure out for sure what the brand on this press was. It's similar to some old Atlas presses, but there are differences too. I spent a lot of time looking at pictures online. I had some help from some friends on some online forums, but I never really found out. Anyway, most of the parts on these things are somewhat interchangeable, and so if you get a chance to pick up one of these old drills, lots of times you can get a smoking hot deal on them. I definitely recommend picking one up. They're nice old machines.